Hi, everyone. I'm Marco DiGeorge. I'm the co-founder and one of the instructors at Truthful Acting Studios. An acting conservatory located in Orlando, Florida. And occasionally I like to come on here and conduct these sessions so we can talk a little bit about acting. And if it's your first time here, just so you know how these sessions work, we have a chat feature right off to the side. You can look in the chat feature. If you have any questions or if you'd like to correspond with us during this session, please, by all means, put your comments into the chat. Our moderator, Samantha DeGeorge, she's here, and she can also chat back and forth with you. And if you have any questions about what we're doing, I'll try to incorporate those questions directly into this session. So today, our topic, what I really want to talk about, is something called the importance of voice in acting. So many times, and if you watched any of our other sessions, I break down what acting is, how to get started in the industry, the important pieces to study, emotions in acting. We talk about all of the basics of more of what we call the process, learning how to authentically step into a moment in order to bring this thing called character to life. But there's also some other components that we need to look at. Now, there's another session I did on what's called the 6 pillars of acting. The 6 pillars of acting is where we break down into sections the things that we need to study. The essential pillars are mental and analytical, right? The ability to focus, the ability to interpret, the ability to analyze. We have our emotional pillar, which is a pretty important one, the ability to authentically feel something and then to express those feelings truthfully. And we have the psychological pillar, which is learning how to understand human behavior, both our own and then how humans interact with each other and what that behavior is like. And so those are our essential foundational pillars. But then there's 3 others on the top. Physical. The ability to use our physical being in the direction of this thing called character, meaning how we change how we walk, how we change how we move, interact, all of those different things go into helping develop a better character. The second is voice, which we're going to be talking about today. The ability to then use and change possibly our voice to become more specific with what the character is trying to convey. And then finally, craft, or the technical element, which are all the little nuance tools that we learn to make the story more specific. But today I want to talk about the voice pillar. Because while it's in what we call an advanced or an upper level pillar, it's essential to our acting. Your voice says so much about you. How you speak to others carries information. And it's a pretty amazing thing when you realize how much information is actually transmitted on your voice. So just in your own lives, when you're speaking to somebody, talk to somebody in your family, or you're talking to a friend, or maybe you're talking to even interacting with somebody that you don't know, your voice tells them where you're from, your accent, right? The regionalized dialect that's contains in your voice can tell somebody, oh, you're from this region. The way you speak can contain possibly an education level or a sociological level, where you are in a segment of society. It can contain how you are feeling that day. Your emotional state is contained in your voice. Your viewpoint of the world is contained in your voice. There's so much information that's right there in the voice. And it's pretty fascinating when you start diving into how powerful our actual voice really is. And really, the voice is simply an expression of our internal feelings and thoughts. That's really all that is. Because even someone who might not be able to speak still has a voice. We usually say voice, it's that this physical thing that comes out of our mouth, right? I mean, the actual sounds that we make. But even sign language, right? Using hand signals to create words is still a way of expression, still a way of using that voice. It's expressing a feeling and conveying a message to somebody else. Very, very powerful. So we need to understand now as an actor, what does that have to do with what I need to do? And that's why I want to kind of go through today all of those different aspects. Because acting training, we've seen a decline in voice, meaning a decline in training specifically for your voice. Unless you're working in music or you're working in musical theater, for example, actors sure will train how to sing, but for a very long time, actors would do intense training on their voice so they could command a stage or command a set in front of the camera. And we've seen a decline, especially here in the States. There just isn't an emphasis on it anymore. And even in Europe, there has been a decline, even though they still put a focus on voice during their training. And we see that focus when the great, British actors or Australian actors, they, they come over to America to do American film. And all of a sudden, man, the way they can change their voice is incredible. Well, it's not just intrinsic inside of them. This is something that they have trained on, a command of the voice. I want to talk about that today. So, but the first thing, though, to really understand, I want to talk about what is a performance. In the aspect of a performance, when we as an actor are in front of the camera or we're on stage and we are performing, we are doing this for the benefit of the audience. Right? It's not for our own benefit. We're not up there acting for ourselves or even for each other. We're with each other. But the whole goal is to tell a story to the audience, which means we need the audience to clearly receive all of the different aspects of the story. So when we look into performance, we realize that a performance needs to be three things. There are three essential elements to a performance. And when I teach directing, I teach these three different things. So a performance must be truthful. That's the first thing. Now, truthful means that the audience must not only see what's happening on a screen or a stage, they also must be able to feel what is happening. And if in many of my past sessions, and I have some other videos online that go into this, it's the emotional realm. It's going into the depth of a human being as a character and really feeling some of the things that our character is feeling, and then learning how to convey that properly. So that way the audience is not just seeing the story, but they're also feeling the story. So a performance must be truthful. And truth is carried on our voice. It's in our physicality, it's in our emotions, but it's also carried on our voice, whether something is truthful and authentic or false and inauthentic. You can hear it. Think of somebody in your life, maybe someone you're very close to. And just imagine, or maybe you might even know an instance of a time when they were not being truthful to you. And you knew that they were not being truthful to you. And it could be as simple as someone's having a bad day and you're like, hey, are you doing okay today? And they're like, yeah, no, I'm fine. And you know they're not fine. Because we're so good at the human level, we're so good at hearing that. Now, we're also visually seeing it in their behavior, but you can mask that a little easier in life. But in the voice, we can't hide behind it. And you will hear that, no, you're not okay right now. And you're like, are you sure you're okay? Do you want to talk about it? And they're like, no, really, I'm good. And you know they're not. It's because you know your instincts are so well trained that you know how to interpret the sounds that are coming out of their mouth and whether or not it's authentic or not. So uh, just recognize that in life, because what we need to do in order to really understand how this affects an audience and how we do things from that end, we need to be able to see real examples of it. Because when an audience is sitting in a theater, whether it's watching a play or a movie, and it's they can tell. Let's just put it that way. They can tell, right? When you're listening to a character, you immediately hear it, whether the character, meaning the actor behind this thing, you can tell whether they are being truthful. Do they really mean the things that they're saying? So it goes into this realm of truth, and we work for for a very long time on getting that truth inside of us. Because the next piece is it needs to be believable. So truthful is the ability for the audience to feel it, but believable means we need to give the audience the ability to suspend their disbelief and go on the journey. So this is a very important one, the suspension of disbelief. So this is something that you have when you are watching a movie or a television show or a play. And if you're able to kind of shut off your logical mind and go on that journey. So if you've ever had this, if you've ever had that experience, you're watching a TV show and you're all of a sudden you're immersed inside of it. You're feeling what the characters are feeling. You're affected emotionally by what's happening on the screen. That's called suspension of disbelief, right? So we're able to go on this journey with the characters, and then we're feeling that truthful pillar on the inside. It's so critical to everything we do. So again, believability though, if you've ever had the experience watching a television show, watching a play, watching a film, and you don't believe what's happening on the screen, meaning the characters seem inauthentic, or something's happening that just it pulls you out of the story. Well, immediately that's what we call a gateway. Immediately that gate shuts, and no matter how good the acting is on the inside, we don't have access to that. So it's the voice carries that believability as well. Because if they don't believe what you're saying, if they don't believe that what you're actually saying you really mean, then it doesn't matter what else you're doing, it cuts off. And then lastly, a performance must be digestible. Now, this is a very critical one, and interestingly enough, it's not worked on enough on the acting side. And this is something I wish that acting instructors would spend more time on doing. Digestible, the ability for the audience to clearly understand what is happening in a story and then to clearly digest it, meaning piece by piece. We must not give the audience too much information at once. We must make sure the information given to the audience is clear. Now, in film, this is done visually and this is done through audio, voices being one of those. On stage, it's mostly done with voice. But if an audience, and if you've ever had this experience, if you're watching something and you don't understand what's going on, you will again disconnect from it. You will have a difficult time going on that journey if you cannot follow it. This comes into all different layers now. This is the main layer we work on when we're dealing with voice. And typically why we put voice on top of those other pillars. I already want an actor to really understand how to, have great mental focus and step into the life and feel something into emotional truth. I want an actor to be able to do that. So then when we start working on voice, we can bring all of that. I want the actor to already understand how to bring truth. Now we learn how do we make that truth crystal clear to the audience. We work on things like vocal clarity. Vocal clarity means the ability to speak in a way in which you are now understood. Many times in life, we have dialects, we have local dialects of wherever you're from, and those local dialects tend to be a little bit muddy, meaning they we speak very fast, we maybe speak unclear, we use words that we don't necessarily use in other regions, and it's fine in life to do that. But we have to understand that if we are not crystal clear with what we're saying, then whoever's receiving that information, it won't be crystal clear in what they're receiving. Well, we can get away with that in life for the most part, but in our acting, we can't. So we work on vocal clarity, we work on enunciation, we work on pace and making sure that we are really speaking and using every word to get our point across. We make sure we're not speaking too fast and things are not running together. And because if we speak too fast, we could maybe lose some of that. And then we work on emphasis, making sure that the points that we really want to get across are emphasized. So we take all of this and we learn how to do that. But one of the first things we have to do though is take a step back and say, okay, well, then where do I start when I'm working on my voice? And the biggest thing is we need to start working on breathing. The biggest caveat about voice, the biggest obstacle of using our voice as an actor or even in life is that we don't breathe properly. So we're trained. We're actually, as babies and as toddlers, right, in those first few years of life, children know how to breathe properly. They come out screaming, right? Really using their mouth, and they're not afraid to just yell and scream and use their voice. It's pretty beautiful when you look at it for what it is. And as we go through elementary school, we're still breathing properly and using our voice, but we're learning culture and we're learning how to step into a society, interacting with others, what it means to be in a classroom or what it means to be with friends. We're learning these social skills. And so it's the beginning of learning how to maybe change how we're breathing. Because when you change how you breathe, you can then control what you're doing. So we actually learn how to pull back our breath, how to breathe through our nose, which is a way to control. And we learn when to speak and when not to speak. And of course, that goes on to middle school, where then we have so much peer pressure that comes in, when you're about 12, 13, 14 years old. And then into high school, where we have more peer pressure that comes in. So all of a sudden, we have these things that are stacked on top of us. And when peer pressure sets in and self-consciousness steps in, we start being worried about what we look like and how we sound and all of these other things, well, we control our voice. We actually we are taught by society and the people around us how to change and control our voice to make sure that we are now perceived in society with the people around us the way we want to be perceived. So it's interesting if you look at the evolution from being born all the way into adulthood, the biggest thing that happens is we as a human learn how to control our voice, which is controlling our emotion, which is controlling our physicality. We learn how to control all of that. And then when we look into, but I want to be an actor. How can I be an actor? It's like, okay, now we have to learn how to undo all of that. Now we have to get back to where we were at age 2, age 3, those younger years where we were not so much in control of all of this. Because breathing, the way we breathe, is a form of control. Now, our body needs oxygen, right? We breathe in air, which goes in and down into your lungs, right? Your lungs start here, and they're pear-shaped, meaning they're thinner at the top and they're wider at the bottom. And so air comes in and fills us up, and your lungs take that air, which is, that is the fuel of everything that we are. We need that to survive. And then your body takes the oxygen out of that. Your it helps us, gives us energy. And it also gives us voice. The interesting thing is that our voice is not just giving our body energy, which is wonderful. It gives our brain the oxygen that it needs. That's great. But it gives us the voice. Because it's like, okay, well, wait a minute. How does oxygen give us our voice? Well, let's take a look at it. We breathe in air. It goes down into our lungs. Now, your lungs are pear-shaped. As I said, they're smaller on the top, and then they get bigger right around the stomach, right? It's above the stomach, but right around there, they fill up to the biggest point. So when we breathe in enough air all the way into there, well, now when that air exhales, when it releases, it comes back out. So when the air is coming back out, it travels up, and it travels through your throat. Now, right here in your throat, you have what we call vocal folds. We call it the voice box. But the voice box, or we say vocal cords sometimes, but they're really not cords. It's not a string instrument. It's vocal folds, which are these folds that they do this vibration very fast as it comes up. So our body is really a wind instrument, not a string instrument. So as it comes up, and so if we take in air and then we do a hum, that hum sound is just that vibration. That's all it is. It's just the vibration without doing anything else. If we allowed air to release without the vibration, that's a straight exhale. Or you could even make the S sound. Breathe in and the slow release of that air is the S without any vibration. But then we go to a Z. Z, same thing. It's the S, but now it's Z, right? And now we're vibrating. It's the same thing. One's with the vibration and one's without the vibration. So that's something that it's like, okay, so we're breathing air in, and now we're allowing it to release out. And the vibration is what we do, what we use to make sounds. Okay, so the simple ones are S, the S, and Z, the Z. A vibrated air and unvibrated air. But now we need to do more with that in order to communicate words, to put words together. So by that time, we're vibrating the air and it's now coming into our face. It's coming into our mouth area. The vibrated air comes into here, and now we have to articulate it, meaning we have to use the components of our mouth. We use our jaw, we use our lips, we use our tongue and our teeth, the top part of your mouth, right? We use all of these different areas to now make specific sounds to speak. So as this air comes up and we vibrate some of it and we unvibrate some of it, right? It comes in, it just comes up. Now we're going to make, for example, the letter T, like in Thomas. So it comes up in t, t, t. And if you do that, t, you'll see, well, what's happening in your mouth? T. We have the tongue, which is hitting the top part of your mouth, t, t, t. As now we're doing this quick release of breath. That creates a T or a D, 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 d. Very similar to t, t, d, d. But your tongue placement is just slightly different. And it's amazing how slight the change it is from a T, t, to a D, d. But we know how to do that. We know how to make that very slight difference to do that. And most of the time, we don't even think about these things, right? When we learn how to speak, it's so automatic that we just do it, right? We learn how to say words and we learn how, so our articulators are nothing we ever learn how to do. We just say, replicate this sound, right? Say this word and replicate it. And so that's how we learn how to speak. But now as an actor, we need to learn, well, what specifically does that mean? And so we learn all of the different elements of, okay, well, the T's and the D's are on the front of our mouth with the tongue. T, t, duh, duh. The Y's, yeah, yeah. Well, that's the sides of your tongue hitting the top. Yeah, yeah. Along with a little bit of movement of the mouth. A G or a K, g, g, or k, k, is kind of the back of the tongue hitting the top of your mouth. G, k. And so we learn how to work on those articulators. Because learning how to articulate properly helps us speak more clearly. So we can say the full word. We can speak clearly through each syllable. And then when we're on stage or in front of the camera and we're speaking as a character, we're speaking the whole word very clearly as we're using our dialogue. And then the audience will have a better opportunity to understand. So European actors, Australian actors, they spend typically at least a few years working on this, which is it needs to be. And truthfully, I would love to see much more work done with American actors as well. We have an issue in this particular country in the U.S. and it's that we're constantly looking for the fast track. We're looking on how to get there more quickly. I call it the microwave society, where we want it now. We don't want to wait for it, and I understand that there's a desire, and it's like there's a passion. You just want to be able to do this very quickly, and I get that. But it's important that along the journey, we still learn how to keep improving the process, and this is definitely one of those. How to articulate. And then it all comes from breath, right? Which is what I started talking about. We breathe that in, and then that release of the breath comes up and then gives our voice power. That's where that comes from. So what happens, we learn how to control our breath, which then pulls back our voice. Typically in life, we learn how to breathe through our nose. And you'll hear this even when in all sorts of different aspects. In exercising, you'll hear it in meditation. You'll see it just in life. It's in through the nose, out through the mouth. And that's wonderful when you are trying to control your breath. Because when you breathe through the nose, if you try that, right? Even a deep breath through the nose is a longer, sustained breath. But now if you try taking a quick breath through the mouth, you can take in so much more air very, very quickly. And what happens is when we bring in that air quickly, it actually accesses our emotional core. It comes in so fast that it kind of kickstarts our feelings. Versus when we breathe in through our nose, it's a calming effect. So it calms our emotions. It calms what we're going through. We call the nose breathing thought-provoked, meaning it's about up here. It's about our head. It's about thinking. Versus mouth breathing is an emotional effect. It's emotionally provoked. So we learn as actors when to breathe through our nose, when to breathe through our mouth. We actually breathe through our mouth much more often than you think we would. And it's not that we have our mouth, agape or something. It's simply that as we're talking, we learn how to take in air and then speak out, and then take in air and then speak out very, very quickly. So we can maintain that energy. And then what it also gives you is something called volume. Now, volume is extremely important in acting. Because if the audience can't hear you, they won't understand you. Even if you are articulating properly and using every word, if the volume is too low, you can't be heard. Now, on stage, it's all about the actor has to we have to breathe in the room and hit every audience member. So we typically speak and project our voice to the back rows of a theater. And it makes sense. It's like, okay, I'm on stage. I need to make sure the back rows of the theater understand me and Okay, so logically we can understand that a little bit easier. But it's still difficult because when I put actors on stage, and especially if I put two actors on stage next to each other and they're having a conversation in this dialogue, well, at first, when you're learning this, it feels very odd to be talking to somebody a couple feet away from you and to be using a much louder voice than you normally would because you're really hitting the audience that's, to the side of you and all the way back, several rows back. But that's who we're really speaking to. We're speaking to the audience. It doesn't matter what's happening with us on stage if the audience does not understand us. So we learn how to speak at a higher volume. Now, a higher volume doesn't mean that we are yelling by any means. It simply means that if I lower my voice to a normal volume, it's down here. But if I use my breath and command the voice, my voice will raise up and have a stronger resonance to it. It will be more clear and powerful. My voice is going to now go out to the audience. What I'm saying will have more importance to it, more impact to the audience. So we learn to speak with resonance. And that is all breath, because if I control my breath, I'll speak more softly. But if I allow more air to come in and then more air to release, it will have greater power. These are all the things we need to we need to learn. It's pretty amazing. I love when I talk about all of the different pillars of acting because it's amazing how much there really is to learn as an actor. And it doesn't mean you have to learn it all up front before you begin acting. It's important to learn the foundation and then go out there and act. And then while you're learning the rest of it, be working in community theater, be working in independent film or student film. Like, you start working up in the industry as you are learning all of the upper layers. So that's the good news. You don't have to learn everything before you begin acting. No, we learn the basics and then we continue training while we are out there working. So there's some questions that were submitted, and there's some more things I want to talk about with the voice, but I think I'm going to address them along with the questions that came in, since some of these questions really addressed these topics. Okay. So the first is, how do you start training your voice in acting? And all right, so let me back up a little bit. So to train your voice, I said this a little earlier, but I want to reiterate it. I think it's important as an actor to learn the foundation first before we start working specifically on the voice. Because when you start working specifically on a voice to convey a story, we must first understand and have learned what a story is, how a story is told, and the importance of certain things to an audience. We also need to be able to command very strong mental focus, which is outward focus to the things, in our environment, to our partner in a scene. We have to command that. So we have to learn that first. And we have to be open. There needs to be a channel, which is right here in our body. There needs to be a channel. It's the same channel as your voice, as your breath, but where the emotion comes up, because we actually block emotion right here in our chest, which is the same place, not coincidentally, but it's the same place we block breath and voice. So we need to have an open channel with emotion, breaking through some of these barriers before we then can start learning how to use the voice specifically, because otherwise we're going to be fighting against ourselves. So the best way to start training your voice in acting is to just start working on the fundamentals of acting, because there's certain exercises we do that even though we don't say we're working on the voice right now, we're working on the voice. We just do it in a much more subtle way. Other things that you can do, though, to start working with your voice is make sure you're speaking clearly, meaning put a focus on enunciating the words that you speak. Slow down your speaking so you have the ability to say every word. And the best thing to do The easiest exercise to do with this is to read out loud. Anything. Just pick up a book, a newspaper, articles, anything you want, but pick up something and read it out loud. And because it's the ability of taking words off a page and now doing something with them and speaking them clearly, making sure we're conveying them. So even when you read out loud, I always like to tell my students, pretend you're, even though if there's no one else with you, pretend you are reading to somebody. Pretend you're telling this story. Pick up Harry Potter or something, right? And you're reading the story. Well, pretend you're reading it to an audience. So really give this information, convey the idea, convey the story outward to an audience. And that this is one of the most important tools to learn. Speaking clearly, breathing properly. Notice your breath. Another reason we tend to breathe shallow. So shallow breathing is when we take in a little bit of air, but it's only up here. It's in the upper part of our lungs, and we don't allow ourselves to breathe deep enough into the lower part of our lungs. Now, this goes into psychology and sociology, which triggers inside of the human being something called vanity and ego. This is a major reason we do not breathe deep enough, is because if we breathe deep enough, the breath goes through our upper rib cage, right, and into our lower rib cage, but into the part of us which is right next to the stomach area. That's what we typically call the stomach area. It goes down deep enough. Well, that is the pair. That's like the balloon of the lungs that expands the most. Well, if we really took a deep breath in, it's going to expand that stomach area. But the vanity and the ego inside of us, as taught by society, has also taught us to keep our core, our stomach area, tight. We learn this in exercising. We learn this in just when you're walking out there. We don't want people to see our stomach area expand, so we tend to tighten it. Well, what happens is if you're keeping a tight core while you're taking a deep breath, and you can try this, right? You can try this by tightening your stomach and then take a breath through your mouth. Well, what happens, right? Your upper body expands. You can actually feel it. You can feel it rise. Your shoulders go up. You can feel it in your chest. It's because we're not actually breathing deep enough. We're breathing shallow, and it's causing this to rise up here because we're tightening this core. So the lower part of our lungs is not expanding to where it needs to be. So what we need to do is do now if you relax your stomach, completely relax your stomach. And what I want you to do is when you take a breath in, don't move your shoulders, right? Make sure the upper body stays where it is. And then so you take the breath in and just your stomach area expands out. That's a deep breath. This is what singers have to learn, right? To get that power in their voice, they have to breathe from there. It's called breathing from your diaphragm. Right? That's the part of us that expands in that area. We feel it in our stomach because that's where the nerve endings are, but it's not your stomach that's expanding. It's the diaphragm, your lungs that are expanding. So that's one of the things we also have to train ourselves in because society teaches us the vanity of not wanting that stomach to expand based on how we look. We have to retrain ourselves as the artist to breathe properly. So things that you can do on your own, practice your breath, taking the deep breath in through the mouth as deep as you can, keeping your upper body from moving. Practice that over and over and over, and then see how that works. And you can also couple that with then reading out loud, enunciating every word. Make sure you speak through the words, right? So it's clarity of voice comes from the consonants, right? We have consonants and vowels. Well, vowels give the voice power, right? La, ha, right? That gives it the power of the voice. And if you listen to music, you can hear that. The power comes from the vowels. The clarity comes from the consonants. So we want to make sure that we're speaking very clearly through the consonants, articulating and enunciating through that. Okay. So let's move on to our next question. How important is reading when it comes to acting? Well, interestingly enough, as I was just talking about this, reading is essentially important. Now, you don't have to be a great reader right now because many people struggle with reading, especially out loud, but it is essential to what we do. And so, one of the, I remember back in early school, we used to have to read stories out loud. And I remember not liking that in front of the class. They would go and the teacher would call on you, okay, and Marco, go ahead and read this paragraph. And we'd have to read it out loud. And man, the vulnerability that came from that in front of your class, it was immense. But looking at it now, I wish we did more of that in school. I wish that was trained to be part of our regular behavior to get over that vulnerability early enough on to say, no, reading out loud is essential. Learning how to read, this is part of the mental and analytical pillar in acting, right? One of the essential pillars is the ability to read, the ability to understand, the ability to interpret very quickly. So we need to hone in on that, and we do that through practice. But then now in the vocal pillar, the ability to take that and speak it out. And something we work on in voice class is the ability to speak words off of a page where it does not sound like you're reading, to find our natural speaking voice. So this is essential as well. So you don't have to be a great reader right now. You don't have to be somebody that likes reading right now. I mean, I understand that. But I would say work on it. Work on your reading skills. And the way to do that is to read as much as you can. Find things you like to read, stories you like to read, whether it's fiction, nonfiction, doesn't matter. But find things that you enjoy and then just read as much as you can. It works on different pillars inside of us as an actor the more you do that. And it's going to give you a much greater comfort level as the artist. So I highly recommend reading as much as you can. So the next question is, would there be a disadvantage for me if I have an accent, and what do I need to do about it? So this is a question I get often. Is I have an accent, I'm from South America and I have an accent. Do I need to get rid of it or neutralize it? Or I have a European accent. Do I need to do something about it? So the good answer is no, you don't. Your accent is you. This is what you have to offer. And in the great thing in theater and in film and in television, we need people from all over with different accents. So you don't have to ever neutralize or get rid of your natural accent. But there are a couple things you do need to do. If you're going to be working in American film, you need to make sure that with your accent, you can still be understood. So if you're speaking English in an American film, but you have a Brazilian accent or a Puerto Rican accent or whatever it might be, right? You have a French accent. All of that is okay. But now we need to learn how to speak the English words and enunciate them, articulate them extremely clearly. And that's really what, and it's no different uh, than somebody that speaks English as a first language. It's no different than that person learning how to speak these words clearly as well. But what we found is that if you can speak the words clearly with your accent, the accent actually adds a lot to what you have to offer. We love different accents and we love having those in characterizations. But we just need to make sure that the accent doesn't muddy up or lose the clarity of the words. So and there might be certain words that are more difficult than others. It depends on where you come from and it's a difference in language. We're not used to articulating our mouth a certain way. So you just have to work on that articulation. It doesn't mean getting rid of the accent. It means articulating through it. So that's great news because I would hate for anyone to get rid of their accent from where they're from. It's part of who you are, and we should never have to hide that or adapt to being somebody else. No, be you fully, but learn how to speak clearly. And this is also true to an English speaking actor that is now going to another country. Now we're going to German and we're going to be speaking German. Well, we need to make sure we're articulating those words properly if we're speaking German. So it's this is across the board internationally. Now, on top of that, if you're going to be doing American film, English speaking American film, it would it would be a good thing to take on an American accent because we have an accent in America just like everyone else does. The rest we might not hear it ourselves, but the rest of the world clearly hears it. How we speak. The great, the great actors from around the world that come here to do American film learn the American accent. And that's why we're so surprised sometimes we're watching a movie and we're like, well, wait a minute, that person's from England, that person's from Scotland. I never would have known. And we never would have knew because, again, their performance was truthful, believable, digestible. All three of those things were wrapped up in their voice. Their voice carried an authenticity of what they were saying in the accent they spoke in. So we can learn that too. So if you have an accent, if you're from a different country and you're here in the U.S. and you're doing American film or theater, um, there will be some roles that you might be asked to play an American character, right? Which would have a regionalized accent to the U.S. And so you can learn how to do those accents, which is no different than learning any other accent. You're putting it on top of how you actually speak. We're not changing how you actually speak. Never. I don't want to change that at all. But we learn how to step in to a different accent. And the beauty of that, so we take air in, the air releases, we vibrate it, all of those remain the same, but then it articulates. So an accent is simply learning new articulation. How do we move the tongue in our mouth? How do we move our lips? Right? We use our lips for the M sound. Right? The TH sound is in the front of our mouth. So we learn that. So if we learn the accent, if we break down the new accent that we're learning and we break it into those technical components, we can say, oh, I just have to learn that new way of moving my articulators, which is the pieces of your mouth. And when you learn how to use those, we can step into an accent. That's really all an accent work is. It takes quite a bit of time, though. An accent's not something you're going to pick up in a week or even a couple weeks. I mean, it takes months to really secure down a solid accent, and it's months of day-to-day work, working every single day on these different things. But sure, if you're from a different part of the world, and you're coming into the U.S., uh, work on learning the American accent. Standard American is what they call it, which is not necessarily New York or it's not necessarily from different areas or like Texas or anything. It's just standard American, and there's plenty of information on how to learn that accent. What you would need to do is search information on wherever you're coming from. If you're coming from Brazil, you would need to do it's an accent Brazil to standard American because you're going to learn how to then change your articulation from what you speak to what you need to speak. So we always want to make sure we're going from this to that when we're learning accents. Okay. Um, but yeah, be who you are fully. I really believe that as an artist. The world needs who you truly are at your core more than they need anything you can become. If you if we peel down all of the different layers of masks, the social masks that we wear, and give the world our truth on the inside, that's the most beautiful thing that we can ever do. Ooh, okay. How can I train to get into voiceover acting? This is a very, very popular right now, voiceover acting. And so, voiceover acting is when lend our voice to things like animation, to video game, to commercials, those type of things. And we're just simply using our voice, which then layers on top of these different genres. So to get into voiceover acting, believe it or not, we need to get into acting. We have to learn the pillars of acting to now lend it to voiceover. I believe voiceover acting is actually more difficult than face acting, or acting with your own physicality on camera. And because if you look at the term that I have here, voiceover acting, think of it like this: voice over acting. The voice is layered on top of acting. So we first have to learn the skills of being an actor. And then we learn the skills, the technical skills of using our voice on top of that. Voiceover acting is much more than simply changing your voice to do, funny characters or different things like that. It's everything I've talked about so far: articulation, clarity. Right? We need to be understood. It's only your voice now. We're not seeing you, so now it's only your voice. The emotion. If any of you are gamers out there, some of the video games that exist are incredible, and the level of truth that the voiceover actors lend it is, Life is Strange. It's sometimes it's like watching a movie when you're playing Life is Strange, or you're playing The Last of Us, or something that is very intense in its storytelling. So it's lending ourselves to the voiceover actor means we still have to command everything we do as an actor. The deep level emotion, truth, believability, digestibility, all of those things are in there. So to get into voiceover acting, learn acting. Start taking an acting class. Even if you never want to step on stage or you never want to be on camera, that's completely okay. You still need to learn the basics of it. And then you'll take voiceover acting classes, which will be layered on top. So at Truthful Acting at our studio, that's what we teach as well. We have a basic process that we teach called our Master Meisner program. It's an 8-month foundational course that we take. It's broken into 2 pieces, part 1 and part 2. And you go through those, and then on top of that, you can then take voice classes, which will then get into how to use your voice properly and then how to lend it to voiceover. But I have a dear friend of mine is a voice director in Los Angeles, and when I talk to him, he says, he always looks for the best actor that then understands the voiceover technique to bring in, versus somebody that is only trained in voiceover. So that's the best thing I would say to do. And then I had a question here in the chat: what would be a good source or website for voice acting classes? Well, I know voices.com, and there's some voice things out there. I think Voice 123. There's a couple of those out there. I would probably start with something like voices.com. And just look around. Like when you look for voiceover, there's a couple of main websites that will come up, and they can sometimes offer resources. The thing to be careful of is, again, we live in a microwave society, especially here in the US. People are always trying to sell you the fast track, meaning that they'll be out there and saying, "Hey, you can take my class, and it's once a week for 6 weeks, and I'll teach you everything you need to know about voiceover." The problem is they're giving you a couple of the technical pieces only, and you're really not learning how to truthfully command truth through your voice in that. So just be careful of that. I'm not saying don't take those classes. You can still take them and probably learn quite a bit. But there's much more to it than that. Anyone telling you that it's easier than it is, be careful. Right? If something is ever too good to be true, it usually is. What I would like to say to you is that acting is difficult, and acting takes a very long time to learn. And it's through that hard work, that sustained hard work over a longer period of time, which then will give you the success that you would want to achieve. So just know that. And that's not a bad thing. Sustained hard work over a longer period of time. I mean, anything in life that you really care about, you'll want to put in that work to do. Uh, but voiceover's fun, and the biggest thing you can do for it right now, read out loud. That's what you do when you're voicing over something. You have a script in front of you and you're reading out loud. So get to work on that. Okay, next question. What is the most important thing to know when pursuing an acting career? Well, actually, funny enough, I just answered it. Patience. Patience. We need to learn. I think as human beings, we just need to learn patience because, man, we've lost it along the way somewhere. But when pursuing an acting career, you're not going to learn it overnight. It's not going to be quick. You're not going to learn it in a year. You're not going to learn it in 2 years. It's going to take, I think it takes a good decade to really get a good, solid handle on it, and then a second decade to enforce it. So about 20 years. Now, it doesn't mean it takes 20 years to start working as an actor. You can start working as an actor after your first year of training. But to improve on it and to really get into the nuance of it, it takes a very, very long time. And what I see is that actors love to want to jump there. And the biggest mistake I see actors make is they think they know it before they do. So they'll get a certain amount of information. They might train for 6 months and they think they have enough to now fully jump into the industry and to stop training. And so what I'm here to tell you is no, continue training over and over and over. For my proof, I point back to London. What do those actors do? Well, they study at university, and then after university, they go into something called conservatory. Conservatory is just like what we offer. It's a focused area of study over a prolonged period of time. So like in our studio, it's about 3 to 4 years you can study with us if you took all of the different courses. Well, it's the same thing in London. It's about 3 to 4 years of conservatory training. Then they come out of conservatory and they go into something called repertory, which is much more prominent over there than it is here. We have repertory in music more than we do acting, but repertory is where then you put it into action over and over and over in theater. So now they do about 2 to 3 years in repertory. So they're learning how to put it on stage over and over and over and over and over in all of these different aspects. So they train as hard to be an actor as they would a doctor or a lawyer, sometimes more. So of course they're that good. They've trained more than many American actors have. Because over here we're looking for that fast track approach, we're trying to bypass it and say, well, I know they take 10 years to train, but I want to take 1, or I want to take 6 months and see if I can do it more quickly. And the issue we have here in the US is that you always have somebody trying to sell you that false hope. So we have to be wary of that. No, look at London. That's what I do when I offer training. I'm like, what does London do? I always try to keep our school in check with what they teach there because they're the leaders of the world in this. But it's just because their culture puts an emphasis on training and an emphasis on art. So that's what I would say to do about that. Just patience and just keep going and be patient with yourself. You're going to stumble along the way, and that's okay. So have fun with it. Have fun with the journey of it. Enjoy every single moment you get to act, whether it's in a class, whether it's in a student film, an independent film, on stage, anywhere. If you get to act, absolutely enjoy it. And then finally, I had one other question I wanted to address. And this to me lent itself almost into voiceover more than anything else, but it's how do I tap into all the characters I feel inside on the spot when on a set? So I want to kind of, I guess, address different elements of this question. First of all, if you're doing a film or you're doing a play or you're doing something that's very specific, meaning you're playing a single character, well, a character means a point of view. That's what a character is. It's a specific point of view in the world around you. So if you think about your actual self, and you're a character in this game of life. But what is your character? Your character is how you see the world, how you interact, your beliefs, your triggers, your faith. Like all of those different things lend into your character that you play in life. Well, when we step into a different character, what we really need to do is alter that point of view. And there's tools on how to do that. I mean, there's a process that we learn in acting on how to step into our point of view and then step into a different sociological point of view. And so that's what a character really is. So if you're on a film set, or you're doing a singular character, there's only one character you're ever going to be stepping into. It's authentically this point of view you're going to obtain for the world. If we jump into different characters and we have to do it more quickly, that's going to be either in an audition, or that's going to be in a voiceover where we might have to voice multiple roles. So that's when I would say part of our training is learning how to very quickly commit to the moment around us. We let go of thinking about it. We take a deep breath. Breathing is important. We take that deep breath, and then we jump into that imaginary world of whatever we are. So if we need to be this one character right now and then we have to jump over to be something else, we can very quickly alter that point of view. In auditioning, we sometimes have to do this. We're reading a character for a role, and then the casting director says, "Okay, but now I want you to switch roles and read this other one." So very quickly, we have to jump over into a different point of view. And so we learn this as an actor. We learn how to then jump over into something else. Okay, so that's what I would say about that is we learn how to do all of these things through the training itself, and it takes time and it takes patience. So start training somewhere, anywhere that you can, and then continue that training over and over and over again. If you have any other questions, we've reached the end of our time today, and I thank you for joining us for today's session. We'll be having another session in a couple weeks, so hopefully you can come back for that one. I'll be posting that soon on our website. But if you have any other questions as well you'd like to address specifically, you can reach out to us here on our email address, info@truthfulacting.com. Send us an email and let us know what questions you might have, whether it's about our studio, what we offer, or anything else in general for acting. And also, we have the phone number here. You can call or text us. That goes directly to Samantha, who's been communicating with you online today. And she can absolutely answer some questions that you may have as well. Just like if you're in the Orlando area and you want to come take a tour of our studio and want to meet us in person, let us know and we can set that up as well. We would love to be able to meet you in person and interact, and then I can answer some questions that you have at that point as well. But just thank you everyone for being here. I love having these sessions. I love being able to talk about acting, and I love your comments and being able to interact with you. So I hope you have an amazing day, an amazing week, and I hope to see you again soon.